So this is a very fun place where spirit meets matter. So we have spiritual experience, spiritual awareness, and then we have a brain injury. And as he says, what happens to the person who was enlightened, who had done all of this spiritual work, had become enlightened and become awakened? Now they have a brain injury, now they've lost consciousness. Is all of that work they've done over? Have they lost it? Because now they're disoriented, now they don't necessarily know who they are, they've had some loss of consciousness. So the brain is not that which creates consciousness, nor is it consciousness, but it is the medium through which we interact with our consciousness. Now, when I use the word consciousness here, I don't mean the consciousness as in the medical sense of you are conscious or not, as in like you're in a coma or you're not in a coma. I mean the spiritual definition of consciousness. The brain is absolutely in charge of whether you are in a coma or not in a coma. But the spiritual consciousness that we have, the brain is the medium through which I interact with it. So when my brain is functioning well, I am able to sit down and meditate and bring my awareness to my breath and chant my mantra and have an experience of light, of love, of truth, of expansion, of oneness, of whatever it may be. I'm able then to stand up from my meditation and move through the world with that awareness. Okay, now brain injury comes. Now I am either unconscious, literally in the medical sense, or I've just had such a traumatic injury that I've had a personality change, or whatever it is that's happened in all the examples. That's only a change in my physical brain. It's only a change in my ability to interact with consciousness. It's not a change in the presence of that consciousness. So for example, the sun is shining. My windows are open, my curtains are open. I'm experiencing the sun. Now something happens and suddenly my curtains close. Well, the sun is still there. I just have lost at this moment my ability to interact with the presence of the sun because these curtains have come down. But it doesn't change the presence of the sun. All it has changed is my ability to interact with that. So for example, in my life, I witnessed a woman very, very close to us suffer from Alzheimer's disease. And as she suffered from Alzheimer's disease, I watched her forget much of her family in completely different ways, whereas she had loved and had loved very deeply. Now, did that love, that deep, I don't mean the attachment, I don't mean the relationship, but the actual presence of love, did it disappear on some dendrites and glial cells? Of course not. Because it doesn't exist there. If it disappeared because some of the cells in my brain were degenerating, it would have had to imply that it actually existed there, which it didn't. But the connection of those cells enabled her to interact with that, to remember it, that no longer is there. But it doesn't mean that the energetic, spiritual presence of love isn't there. The work that's done to wake up, that consciousness that we've touched, that's with us. Because look, when you go from one life to another life, let's shift for a moment from being unconscious in the brain to literally being physically dead. When you shift from one body to another body, along with the soul, the subtle body goes, right? Man, buddhi, ahankar, travels with the soul. Now, that is where that spiritual work that I have done, it's not sitting in my blood cells somewhere. My awareness, my consciousness, my awakening, my enlightenment, my truth, my presence as love, not my love of you because you bring me flowers, but just that experience, that presence, that transmitter of love. That's not taking place in some cell someplace. That's me connecting with me. That self meets self. That's oneness. That doesn't exist physically someplace. When you die, the sadhana that you've done, the spiritual practice that you've done, that's why when we speak about the law of karma and rebirth, you're carrying that with you into your next life. Well, even if you weren't brain dead before you died, you're certainly brain dead after you die. So if you needed the brain to be healthy to benefit from your spiritual experience, it wouldn't go with you into the next life. So no, you don't lose it. No, the brain is not where it is held and stored. On the other hand, the brain does change as we have spiritual experiences. When you meditate, it literally changes your brain. They've done enough extraordinarily exciting mapping of, monks meditating. So we know what happens in the brain, A, while we're meditating, and B, long-term changes. But those long-term changes are things that lead to me being better able to navigate my way through the world in oneness, in love, in compassion, in simple things like patience, foresight, understanding, broad vision. That's where the brain comes in and plays that role. But consciousness is not of the brain. Yeah, you're right. We need it to interact with consciousness. When I'm brain dead, I'm no longer conscious of being conscious. But it hasn't taken away who I really am, that which I've touched, that way I've expanded. Because that's energy. Not just electrical signals in my brain, but actual energy between me and the world. That's energy of soul, energy of spirit. And that doesn't rely on the brain.